I'm Sarah Bennett, 27, walking barefoot along the cracked shoulder of Highway 16 with my toddler pressed against my ribs. Cars roar inches away, horns blaring, wind shaking my balance, and fear sits in my throat. But I don't stop. Then, brakes scream. My dad's old pickup skids sideways and blocks the lane in front of me. He jumps out, eyes wild, scanning the road behind us. "Sarah, where's your car?" he yells over the traffic. I stare at him and finally say it out loud. My husband's mother took my keys. She said it was safer if I couldn't drive anymore. My phone was dead, my bag was empty, and control had been quietly stripped away from me completely. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. The quiet inside my father's truck felt unreal after the chaos we'd escaped. The heater hummed, drying the sweat on my neck, but the tight ache in my chest didn't ease. My daughter was asleep in her seat, her breath soft and even, unaware of how close everything had come to breaking. I watched her for too long, until my fingers started to tremble. Fear drained away, replaced by something heavier, embarrassment. "How long has this been happening?" my father asked. He kept his eyes forward, jaw locked, hands firm on the wheel. He wasn't asking like a parent, comforting a child. He sounded like a man trained to document facts. "Almost half a year," I said quietly, "since she learned to walk." His breath hitched. "Why didn't you call me?" "Because it didn't feel like violence. That's how it hides, Dad. There was no shouting, no bruises. Control arrived." It didn't begin with fear. It began with help. It began with Linda standing in my kitchen one evening, setting down a pot of soup like she owned the counter. "You look worn out, Sarah," she said softly. "Why don't I stay the night and take the baby so you can finally sleep?" And I was worn out. My body said yes before my mind caught up. Then it was Mark telling me, "You don't need to stress about money anymore. I handle numbers all day. Let me manage the accounts so you can focus on being a mom." I was overwhelmed, drowning in diapers and exhaustion, so I handed over the passwords like they were nothing. I stared out the truck window as trees slid past in a blur, trying to find the moment when help turned into control. It doesn't happen loudly. It happens politely. "Dad, you ever hear about the slow boil? If you drop someone into chaos, they fight. But if you warm the water gradually, they don't notice they're burning until they can't move." That was my marriage. First, Linda moved into the guest room, temporarily. Then she was in the kitchen every morning, adjusting how I held the spoon, correcting how I fed my child. Then she started reviewing grocery bags, holding up items like evidence. "This isn't nutritious. This is unnecessary." When I protested, Mark sighed like I was a problem he had to manage. He said I was emotional, overstimulated. He said motherhood had made me irrational. My father's jaw tightened in the passenger seat. "Did a doctor say that?" he asked. "No," I said. "Mark did." Every question I asked became proof that something was wrong with me. When I noticed our savings had been moved, Mark said I was paranoid. When I asked why his mother had a key to our bedroom, he said I was being dramatic. They spoke in calm voices while rearranging my reality. The day my keys disappeared, I didn't scream. I searched quietly, heart pounding, until Mark said, "I took them. You've been scattered lately. I'm just keeping you safe." Safe? My hands were raw from gripping the baby carrier as I walked. My phone wasn't mine anymore either. Every night, Mark said he was helping me unplug, protecting my mental health. But he read my messages. He tracked my location. "I stopped calling you, Dad, because I didn't want them to know I was slipping. I believed if I behaved better, I'd earn my life back." That's when my father pulled the truck over and turned to me with a look I'd only seen once before, when he used to hunt men who thought they owned other people. "That's not help," he said. "That's a siege." The driveway looked staged, like a photo meant to convince strangers that nothing ugly could happen here. Imported cars lined the curve. The hedges were trimmed with surgical precision. Even the gravel was raked smooth. My father's truck felt like a scratch across polished glass. We didn't belong here, and that was the point. Through the windshield, I saw them before they noticed us. Mark was reclined on a patio chair, tablet balanced casually on his knee, scrolling like the world was still predictable. Linda sat beside him, a glass of white wine cradled in her hand, laughing at something he'd said. They looked relaxed, comfortable, like two people who believed control meant permanence. "Stay here," my father said quietly. I didn't answer. I unbuckled my daughter instead. My fingers fumbled with the straps, nerves firing too fast for coordination. When I stepped out of the truck behind him, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not courage, exactly, but certainty. Linda saw us first. Her smile didn't disappear. It froze. "Oh," she said brightly, voice sharp around the edges. "Look who wandered back." My father climbed the steps one at a time, boots heavy against stone. He didn't acknowledge her tone. His eyes stayed on Mark. "Where are her keys?" Mark stood slowly, smoothing his shirt like he was preparing for a meeting, not a confrontation. "Let's not overreact," he said calmly. "She's been unstable. New mothers go through phases. We were worried about her safety." The words were gentle, practiced, designed to sound reasonable. "I'm not unstable," I said, stepping forward before fear could stop me. "I'm leaving." Linda laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Leaving where? You don't have a job, you don't drive, you can barely manage yourself. We're protecting you." My father moved between us without raising his voice. "You're not protecting her," he said flatly. "You're restraining her." Mark crossed his arms, squaring his shoulders. "It's my house, my car. She can walk out if she wants, but she's not taking my child." The air shifted. Even the birds went quiet. My father stepped closer, his voice low and precise. "You are withholding personal property, restricting movement, and threatening unlawful restraint. That's criminal." Linda scoffed. "She's hysterical." "She needs her documents," my father said, turning slightly toward me. "Go, now." I ran. The house felt different the moment I crossed the threshold. Colder, stranger, like the walls had been watching me instead of sheltering me. I grabbed a duffel bag and started shoving clothes inside without folding. Onesies, shirts, anything my hands touched. My breath came in sharp bursts. My father stood in the doorway, his back to me, unmoving. A barrier. "Dad?" I whispered. "I saw it months ago. The way you stopped laughing. The way you hesitated before answering simple questions." His voice tightened. I told myself it wasn't my place. I swallowed. I didn't stay because I was weak. I stayed because I was preparing. I pulled the folder from underneath the mattress. Photos, statements, screenshots, messages between Mark and Linda discussing how to manage me. Control, documented in their own words. My father looked at the evidence, then at me. "Let's go." They tried to stop us at the stairs. Linda screamed into her phone, her voice sharp and panicked now, no longer controlled. She kept saying words like police or in custody, as if repeating them loudly enough could turn the situation back in her favor. Mark stepped directly into our path, shoulders squared, jaw tight, like he could physically block the collapse of the authority he'd been living off for years. My father didn't slow, not even a little. He moved forward with the certainty of a man who knew exactly where the law ended and where intimidation began. Mark hesitated for half a second. That was all it took. We walked past him. The drive to my father's house felt unreal. My body was still running on adrenaline, but my mind had gone strangely quiet. No panic, no tears, just the heavy awareness that something permanent had cracked open. By the time we pulled into his driveway, the adrenaline drained all at once. My hands started shaking so badly I had to sit down before my knees gave out. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and old books. Safe. Familiar. I emptied the duffel bag onto the kitchen table and laid the folder beside it. The sound of paper hitting wood felt loud in the silence. Bank statements, transfer receipts, loan agreements, titles, screenshots printed out because I didn't trust digital proof to stay untouched. It didn't take long to see the damage. My car was gone, sold weeks earlier to a dealership 2 counties away. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even known it was listed. The money hadn't gone into our joint account. It had been routed, cleanly, intentionally, into paying off a credit card in Linda's name. Then the loan. $40,000. Taken out in my name, my credit, my identity. The signature looked like mine at first glance, but it wasn't. A careful forgery, the kind done by someone who'd watched me sign my name hundreds of times. My trust fund was worse, empty, completely drained. Years of savings erased quietly, transaction by transaction, while I was being told I was too emotional to handle finances. I tried logging into my banking app, incorrect password. I tried again, locked out. When I called the automated line, the robotic voice read the balance back to me, 0. "They didn't just control you," my father said quietly, staring at the papers spread across the table. "They tried to erase you." Something shifted then. I stopped feeling embarrassed, stopped questioning whether I'd somehow misunderstood things. This wasn't miscommunication, this was strategy. Hours later, they showed up. Mark was loud, Linda was frantic, they talked over each other, demanding to see the baby, threatening court, insisting this was a misunderstanding. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply opened the door and handed my father the envelope. Inside was everything. Proof. Messages between Mark and Linda discussing how to limit my access to money, how to keep me dependent, how long it would take before I stopped pushing back. Their confidence collapsed page by page as my father read. "This isn't a marriage issue," he said evenly. "This is felony fraud." The silence that followed was different, heavy, final. I gave them a choice: return the money, every dollar, or face charges. They left without saying goodbye. 3 months later, I locked the door of my own apartment. Small, quiet, mine. The furniture didn't match, the walls were bare, but nothing inside it belonged to anyone who wanted to control me. For the first time, I slept without permission. I wasn't grateful for the cage anymore. "This wasn't a relationship problem," my father said quietly. "This was a criminal one." When Mark and his mother arrived hours later, shouting about rights and threatening custody, I didn't argue. I handed my father the folder. Inside was everything. Proof. Messages between Mark and Linda discussing how to limit my access to money, how to keep me dependent, how long it would take before I stopped pushing back. Their confidence collapsed page by page as my father read. "This isn't a marriage issue," he said evenly. "This is felony fraud." The silence that followed was different, heavy, final. I gave them a choice: return the money, every dollar, or face charges. They left without saying goodbye. 3 months later, I locked the door of my own apartment. Small, quiet, mine. The furniture didn't match, the walls were bare, but nothing inside it belonged to anyone who wanted to control me. For the first time, I slept without permission. I wasn't grateful for the cage anymore.